You need a wire?
I don't know. We're all set up. So I know you had answered a few questions for us online, right? You had emailed us a couple questions.
It was a while back, but yeah.
Yeah. So since then, we've kind of revised them and added some and taken some away. So just to begin, if you could state your name, your full name, and just tell us a little bit about...
Yeah, let me just ask you, what is the overall...
The encompassing theme.
Well, the objective or goal, or what is it Matthew's trying to do? Write a book?
Yeah.
Write a movie?
Yeah, so he is, we're setting out together to write a book that's kind of based around the idea of the American dream and just discussing where we're at now with the American dream. Is it still something that is a goal for people that are kind of just coming up in the world? Has it changed? So it's kind of looking back at the components that made up that dream, taking stock of it now, and then trying to look towards the future and see kind of what shifts need to be made in order to allow the average American to continue to be prosperous. So the motivation...
To be prosperous.
Yes.
Help the average American be prosperous.
I would say that is kind of a supporting theme. But we're really trying, at this stage, we're just trying to interrogate, is prosperity a part of the American dream? What does that look like to each individual? And that kind of touches on a couple of different questions that I even have for you, which have to do with your relationship to the American dream, if you feel like that was accessible to you growing up, how you feel that's changed throughout your lifetime. But to start at the beginning, we'd just like to hear a little bit about where you're from originally and where your roots are.
Chappaqua is 40 miles north of New York in fashionable Westchester County. And then, of course, having graduated from the elevated Horace Greeley High School, number 2 in the nation, was off to college, 8 years in California, back to New York in 1968. Been here ever since. Years at GE, IBM, other companies.
Now, what did your parents do?
Well, my father was, he graduated from University of Washington at the moment that the 1929 economic disaster hit the United States.
Yeah.
There were no jobs. But he was very famous because he was captain of the University of Washington Huskies football team, heavyweight boxing champion of the West. So he was given a 19 cents per hour labor job, which he was thrilled to get as a recent college graduate. And this company, which separated and still separates the air we breathe into constituent oxygen, hydrogen, xenon, argon, blah, 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 the constituent parts.
Yeah.
And then they sell that stuff. Worked his way up. They moved us 18 times because that's what big companies did back then, and they knew that the employees would take a move whenever they were told, because despite the discomforts and the disruption in relationships and kids' friends and schools and this and that and the other thing, to have a job at all back then was so valuable that you just did whatever you were told. Am I getting off the track?
No.
Oh.
Perfect. Now, where did you go to college in California?
It was called California Western University in San Diego. Do you know?
I'm actually from California. I went to school at UC San Diego, so I'm familiar.
Ah,
Yeah.
well, Point Loma is where the campus still is. I was out there not too long ago. It's now called Nazarene College, I think.
Yes. Okay, I've heard of it.
They sort of sold themselves to Nazarene College, whoever that is. So, right out of college, 1964, IBM had their tent in the, for the graduates.
Yeah.
Went to work for them, and the rest is history.
Now, what did you do at IBM?
The most recent job was business development executive for Manhattan for IBM Global Services.
Interesting. And you're currently in real estate?
Yes, IBM says when you're 65, go away. You're retired.
Okay.
So I went home, put my feet up for the first time in 40 years. And around 11:30 in the morning, I'm watching TV, and I said to Catherine, "So, what's for lunch?" And she said, "I married you for better or for worse, but not for lunch. Get the hell out of here and find something to do." And I said, I really don't know what that would be. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, it just didn't seem like anybody's hiring retirees, So she said, "Well, why don't you get your real estate license?" And I said, "Real estate license? Why would I do that?"
Yeah.
She said, "Well, on a given Sunday, I'll have 2 or 3 open houses, which all have to be kind of in the afternoon, kind of relatively at the same time. And I can't be in all of them at the same time, so we have to hire other agents." And I said, "So we have to take some of our commission, pay the other agents?" "Yes." "So if I get my license, we keep the money?" "Yes." But I just love it. I wish I had done this instead of GE and IBM. I mean, there are things that I'm very glad to have done working for those big companies, but big hierarchical structures like that with 14 levels of management, there are so many people stepping on each other's hands on the ladder to success that it's so unlike real estate, because I had the Minister of Finance of France referred to me through a friend, Parisian, who actually is Matthew's. Well, you met Lou.
I don't believe I did.
Ariane.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ariane.
It's Ariane's former husband, JP,
Okay.
referred me to the former Minister of Finance of France. Now, at IBM, if there's somebody really important that comes along, higher management will say, "Thanks so much, you go back to the office, we'll take it from here."
Yeah.
That isn't what happens in real estate.
Right.
So we became friends with them after selling them a $3 million pied-à-terre. They invited us to go over to Paris and stay with them in their chateau in Arrondissement 14. And that's just a sidebar of why real estate is such a terrific thing. You can meet stars. We just sold property to a Fox News person, and just sold an apartment for a CBS News person that does the nightly news. And when those important famous people come along, they're ours.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen in big hierarchies.
So the thing that you like the best about it is that the hierarchy is totally different structure, and you get to interact more directly with the people that you're actually working with.
You could say that,
Yeah. Neat.
yeah.
So backtracking a little bit, as we mentioned, one of the themes of this book is kind of talking about the American dream. What does the term the American dream mean to you?
Well, I think it's what it means to the ages that have used that term. There are people, my grandfather was one of them, my grandmother, both, all four of them, came here from Sweden and Ireland because there was no dream in Sweden and Ireland. They were being choked to death because there was no opportunity. Anything you ate, anything you found, anything you got was through your own hands, the fingers of your own hands. And so the 30 or 40 million that came through Ellis Island, my four grandparents included, they understood that, although I don't think they believed that the streets are literally paved with gold, I think they understood that it was a big, open, free, growing country that had pretty well let the world know about the Homestead Act, which said, go west, young man, and put your stake in the ground someplace where no one has put their stake in the ground. And if you build a house, raise a family, and live there for 10 years, we will put those, 20 acres or something in your name, free.
Yeah.
And that is what happened to my family. They were named as Holm, Holm.
Yeah.
So when our property, which was and still is an island near Olympia, Washington, the opportunity to add ES to the HOLM was, my grandfather thought that was a good idea, and so we became the Holmes family, which we are today. And they understood, they absolutely did understand that if you build it, they will come. If you think of a opportunity and chase it, pursue it, and get up early and work hard, all the things that support life, meaning money and education and property and nutrition and opportunity and joy and all that stuff is going to happen if you make it happen. In other words, there's no one that's going to keep you from making that happen here. And that's no longer the case, but certainly up until relatively recently, that has been the case. What has happened is that whole process has turned itself into a money-based society, and behind that terrible priority of get the money at any cost, do whatever it takes, cheat, lie, steal, fake it, whatever, just get the money. Is a disappointment, certainly, to I think the world, observing America from across the internet and through Facebook and Instagram and this, that, and the other. We're now regarded, I think appropriately so, as careless and stupid and undisciplined. We've let our standards slide into the toilet for, in a lot of ways, not the least of which is that you see these statistics crawl across the Chiron, CNN, Fox News, and the Alphabet news networks, things like 54% of all teenagers are now watching pornography on their browsers every day. Every day. And I mean, the effect of that is absolutely devastating. But it's out there because it's just one example, along with the fact that we allow our young people to buy $30 billion a year, not only in heroin, but the heroin comes from the Helmand province in Afghanistan, which is wholly owned, operated, and administered by the Taliban, who have not only pledged allegiance to ISIS, but if you are wondering if the way they get the $2.5 billion a year for the explosives, the technology, the guns and materiel to blow the arms and legs off our sons and daughters and uncles and fathers actually comes from us, you'd be right.
Yeah.
And you won't hear that from the White House, the Congress, the governor, or any place else. And I have to think, I'm not the only one, afraid that when there's $30 billion worth of anything being transacted, the channels of distribution are so vast. I mean, you have to have a FedEx, you have to have a UPS, you have to have hundreds of thousands of people in the channels of distribution to get it across the border from the drug cartels who dig the tunnels, and then these people, it doesn't just suddenly show up in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Somebody drives it there.
Yeah.
Somebody puts it in these little glassine bags. Somebody takes it to the high school kids and sells it to them and has made it a fashionable thing, despite the fact that 34,000 Americans die each year from heroin, which is 10 times the number of soldiers who have died on the battlefield in the entire Afghan war. You don't hear a thing.
Yeah.
Not a peep. Not a word.
Now, you mentioned that America has kind of slipped into a state of carelessness, stupidity, being more undisciplined, and the drugs obviously have a big role in that. Do you see those characteristics as being the result of a change or the cause of a change? So, for instance, these channels of distribution, did those channels of distribution cause or help facilitate the rise of this heroin issue? Or do you see those as being the result of a demand?
Well, it's interesting how it happened because on my watch, meaning the Vietnam War, we, the United States Army, Marine Corps, etc., could not cross the Cambodian border. We were told that we're there at the request of the South Vietnamese government to keep Vietnam from going communist. But you can't go into some other country. And Cambodia is another country, along with Thailand, where the North Vietnamese, when we were getting the better of them, they would scamper across the border and we'd have to stop. Mm-hmm. So the CIA sent a person named Doug Haift, Hoeft, a CIA operative, to negotiate with the powers that be in Cambodia and Thailand for permission to quietly pursue the Viet Minh and kill them on Cambodian Thai land. Mm. So what he said is, what do you warlords need from us to allow our troops to do battle on your land? And they said, set up the channels of distribution of our heroin, and we'll let you kill anyone you want. So, you won't hear this from probably anyone in your lifetime, but Air America flew 40 coffins a day from Vietnam to the Army Oakland Army Terminal, and the planes would arrive early evening, and the coffins, sometimes several hundred, would be put into a locked, refrigerated facility. The heroin was extracted, even though this whole facility, the size of a gymnasium, was locked. And the people who came in to take our dead soldiers' bodies out of the coffins in the morning, when they went in, the coffins, the heroin was gone. Just a miracle. Mm-hmm. Now, that kind of thing cannot be done without arrangements.
Right.
Those arrangements were made from the very highest office in this land. Now, they might have had what they thought was a good reason for that in 1965, 68, 70. But the net effect is that the channels of distribution were set up to market heroin in this country, and so a lot of mortgages are being paid, a lot of cars are being leased, a lot of food, a lot of transactions are being paid for by money that comes from what today is a $30 billion a year heroin trade. Mm-hmm. Now that's just too damn much money for the powers that be to ignore. So, the American dream, let's get back to that. Mm-hmm. How is that affected by this? Well, this is just one of a number of narratives that slowly eat away at the foundations of why my grandparents came here, what they came here to do, and their morals and ethics that they carried forward, with them. I don't want this to go down the toilet here of negativism, but
well, it's important to explore all of the different roots of why you feel that ideal has changed. So please feel free to continue.
Well, it's money. Now, the money issue is really at the basis of this. And where we are today, unfortunately, is we are bankrupt. Why are we bankrupt? We're bankrupt the same reason that any one of the people that you know that have been to a bankruptcy become bankrupt. You owe more money than you have.
Right.
Simple. And you would think that an erudite, educated, experienced country like America that teaches, we have people that teach how to avoid bankruptcy, how to remain financially sound.
Mm.
You would think that we would take our own advice. But we don't, and everybody really knows why we don't. Why do we spend all this money? Well, that's a longer conversation than you have time for today. But the bottom line is that democracy is failing for a number of reasons, but this is a really, really big one. There are just too damn many people that need to find success in doing things in return for money. And we're being gamed, we're being tricked. The 30 billion that the Taliban have figured out how to carve out of us a year, it's a pittance. It's a tiny little, not important. But even though Trump is espousing, fixing all this, he just authorized making the debt ceiling even higher.
Yes.
And we all know what that means. We all know where that goes. Ultimately, some authority is going to call you out and say, you're bankrupt. So I'm going to take things from you because you're not paying me back. Now, it isn't rocket science to figure out who that is. We all know who that is. That individual, that entity to whom we owe $1 trillion of the 1.5 trillion. I'm sure you don't have any trouble figuring out who that is.
Who do you think that is?
Well, there isn't any think about it. I mean, when we outsourced hundreds of billions of dollars worth of American jobs to China, we said, well, now they've got our money, let's borrow it back from them. And that ball has just gained more and more and more. And then we've had our politicians, God bless them, that needed money for some of their pet projects, and they spied Social Security. My God, do you realize there's $800 billion in Social Security in the banks? Let's borrow it. Oh, we can't do that. Why? Well, it's not our money. It's been extracted from people's paychecks. You can't touch their money. Oh, yeah, we can. Yeah, we'll pay it back. Did they pay it back, Sandra? Did they?
Not that I know of.
Not that anyone else knows of either. So the $800 billion that they borrowed, it would take the rest of the day to share with you what they did with the money.
Right.
Not a pretty sight.
Now, you mentioned that earlier in reference to your, I believe it was great-grandparents.
Yes.
The part of their understanding of the American dream was that it will happen if you make it happen, and that there's nothing that's really preventing you from making it happen. Considering what you were saying about democracy failing and that too many people want to work just for this money exchange, what do you think would be a more ideal system than where we're at now, as you mentioned, just working for that money exchange? And what do you think needs to change in order to get back to that ideal system?
Well, we're talking about challenging democracy as we know it, which has failed. It's better than communism, obviously, because communism has been a monumental failure in the Soviet Union and Cuba. And some people could say, yeah, but China's a communist. China's not communist. Communism really means that you put people in these farms that the government owns, and you make them work 20 hours a day, and you give them a bowl of rice each day. They don't do that. Mm. I mean, they're not getting $80 an hour like our unions have pumped up at least the automobile industry, which unfortunately means we can no longer afford to make cars that can be competitive because the cost of the people to make them is too much to make any profit. Mm. So for democracy to self-destruct, there isn't a hell of a lot else that has to happen. Because we no longer cooperate, we no longer listen, we no longer consider, we just want to destroy each other. If you're a Democrat, it doesn't matter if the current conservative government comes up with an idea for a chicken in every pot. They'll say, no, we don't want it. It doesn't matter if it's free bread for everybody. No, don't want it. If it's a new tax program that'll save the middle class from bankruptcy and put them on easy street, no, got to be something wrong with it. So when you get to a point where we have seen the enemy and it is us, the only thing that will really save our democracy is if we're attacked from abroad, which could happen. Mm. North Korea is too small an entity to do it by themselves. Mm. That's kind of like being bitten on the bottom of your shoe by a Yorkie. But if Kim Jong-un is smart enough to attract an attack by America, and China does what it has said it will do, which is we have to side with North Korea, then the stage is set for people dividing sides. You got the Axis powers, you got the Allies, and World War III would be on, which I have to say, just between you and I think will happen, only because it always has. Mm. From the day that the first 3 humanoid types lived in caves, if we saw somebody, wherever their cave might be, that had things that we didn't have, we'd go take it from them. Basic human behavior. We would rape their women, we would incarcerate their kids and make them work for us. We would move into their cave, make it one of ours, kill all the men. And it's nice to think that the advice and teachings we've had over the last certainly 2,000 years could have an effect to stop all that, but it hasn't and it doesn't and it won't. There is not literally 5 minutes since cuneiform began to record human interaction on clay tablets that humans have not been killing each other, because you have something I want.
So you think that the only way that we'll get past these barriers to the American dream is if war occurs and we completely destruct and then have to rebuild?
Well, that's a toughie. That's a toughie, because when I advised Jimmy Carter, 1975, I remember seeing something in the New York Times about the nuclear attack drills that all the grade schools and the high schools had to do. The siren would go off and we'd all have to get under the table and put your books over your head and so on and so forth. Why? Well, because the Soviet Union had 48,346 nuclear-tipped, in silo, ready-to-cook ICBMs in over 16,000 locations, mostly in the Urals. And the United States had 28,956 nuclear-tipped, in silo, ready-to-go ICBMs in North Dakota, Montana, and Wyoming, basically. There's 16 other sites, but I said to myself, in reading the article where it said, and roughly 20% are too old and obsolete and wouldn't fire successfully even if there was a nuclear attack. I thought to myself, for God's sake, 20% of our ICBMs and theirs are obsolete? So I wrote a letter to the White House. Jimmy Carter, dear sir, most desperately suggest you call Leonid Brezhnev on the red phone and invite him to bring they're called the GRP, but it's a small point, over to North Dakota, Wyoming, Idaho, and watch us dismantle 15,000 American ICBMs, providing that he invites us to go to the Ural Mountains with the New York Times and NBC and CBS and ABC while we watch them destroy the equivalent number of thousands of ICBMs. And they did it. They did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you know that, Sandra?
Did
you know that?
It's been a while since I brushed up on my history, but I had heard that happened, yes.
And I got a letter, a very nice thank you letter from the White House. Which is still hanging around someplace. I should really frame the damn thing. But we have a kind of a similar situation today relative to obsolescence, but make no mistake, the growing number of countries that just can't look in the mirror anymore unless they are nuclear nations. There's only one end to this. Sad to say, but there's only one end to that, and this probably isn't going to be a positive part of your thing here, but yeah, there's just too many places now that North Korea has them, we gotta have them. And it's growing exponentially.
Yeah. So in your lifetime, backtracking a little bit, do you feel like the American dream was available to you?
Well, I lived it. I'm living it right now. So, I mean, yes, of course. I'm sorry I got off the American dream
okay.
subject altogether. But some of the things that are interrupting the American dream is you have to be able to dream if you're going to have it. And in order to do that, you have to, I mean, in that the American dream is a positive thing, not a negative thing. You have to be in a positive frame of mind. You have to be thinking positive thoughts like, what do I need to do in order to participate in the American dream? Do I fill out forms and get, what do they call the free food things? Food stamps.
Food stamps.
Do I get the food stamps and go to the homeless shelter and try to get as much free food as I can and maybe try to deal heroin on the side? No, that's not the American dream. The American dream is you get educated and you take the education that you are ready, willing, and able to absorb, and you look for solutions to problems that haven't been solved. Whether it's a bar, a restaurant, a drugstore on the corner, or coming up with a completely new product idea. But the tools of incorporating a business, they're there. Being able to find the legal documents to get people to do business with you, non-disclosure agreements, and all that kind of stuff, it's all online. It's all there. The creativity isn't there. Then you go look for a position doing something that someone else has already invented. Now, what would those be? Well, if you were to pick up the Sunday New York Times and turn to the classified ads section, you would see about 15,000 jobs that they cannot fill because they're looking for people that are educated, drug-free, responsible, referenceable, serious, available, keep going.
Yeah.
So you have to become that if you're going to succeed as being part of the American dream. Interesting story. One night in the 80s, I think it was, or maybe the 90s, there was a ABC late night show called Nightline. And the talking head, I can see his face, I think his name will pop up, Jewish last name, very nice guy. Any event, America was burning down yet another city. It was happening in Miami at this particular point in time. Ted Koppel's Nightline. So Ted had split screen, and he was showing the burning of Miami. The city was in flames, and over the city being in flames, there were two squares with two people's faces. And he said, I'm turning to Representative Washington, I think her name was, maybe still is or something, very heavy black woman, think a representative, not a senator, I don't think. She was a representative from that section of Miami or something. And he was saying, why are your people burning your city to the ground? Well, she said, we want them high-paying jobs. Got to have those high-paying jobs. We got to have those high-paying jobs. And Ted said, well, what high-paying jobs are you talking about? And she, these are the, job categories that she mentioned. And Ted said, well, those require a degree of, education. You have to be capable of doing that. And this woman actually said, we don't care about all that. We just want them jobs. Oh, my God. Oh, okay. So then he cuts over to a sort of a mocha-colored guy face. And he said, this is all about the American dream now. I'm getting to the American dream part. He said, Luis, I said, yes, Mr. Koppel, yes. He said, Luis, when did you arrive in America? He said, 18 years ago. And how did you get here? He said, I swam. You swam? What do you mean you swam? I swam across the Pecos River from Michoacan, Mexico, into Texas. And he said, what did you do then? He said, I went to Florida. He said, how did you do that? He said, I walked. You walked from Texas to Florida? He said, well, yes. Okay, how old were you then? He said, 16. He said, well, what did you do then? He said, I got a job in a Burger King, mopping floors. He said, and did you speak English at that time? He said, no. He said, well, how did you acquire, you seem quite articulate now. He said, I took a course, I read a book, I practiced, I went to school to learn English. He said, and what happened then? He said, well, I was offered a higher position fixing stoves or some kind of level up from washing the floors. And he said, okay, and what happened then? He said, well, I pursued my high school equivalency. It's called an MEP or something like that. Yeah. He said, it took me 2 years to get my MEP. And he said, in 2 years, what happened at Burger King? He said, well, I was promoted to a flipper, the burger flipper guy. He said, oh, and what happened in the school? He said, well, I got my high school equivalency and I applied to the local community college. Oh, while you were working at Burger King? He said, and you're still at Burger King? Yes, and I got promoted again to an assistant manager. And then I got promoted to, I had 4 Burger Kings. And he said, and what was going on at the college? He said, well, I pursued a pre-med thing in the local college. And I said, then what's happening at Burger King? He said, well, I was managing a part of the business there. And he said, and then what happened? He said, well, I got my medical degree. And then, how the camera sort of pulls back? And it revealed grandma, grandpa, 2 cars, a big yard and a house, and 6 grandchildren.
Yeah.
That's the American dream.
Yeah.
So, we have people in this country who feel that, feed me, I'm here. You owe it to me. Don't tell me what I have to do. Just keep the free stuff coming. And I need a raise, by the way, because, I have a lot of stuff I need to buy and do. And a lot of abuse to these free programs. For example, we have a summer house on a lake in Sullivan County, and there is a ShopRite 4 miles away. And Catherine went to this ShopRite one Friday afternoon.
Catherine is your wife?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And there was a woman that had 4 shopping carts, and she had them all in a row, and she had them piled with, I mean, incredible amount of food. And Catherine had 2 things or something,